this is in her book, and I love this. She says a lot of people think structure is scaffolding that your protagonist runs around. She said, but it's not. I think so much of screenwriting is it's often taught by story analysts who approach story structure as if it's some kind of formula. And I think that's why a lot of people who are true artists sort of resist the idea of story structure. But story structure is not a formula. Story structure, to me, it's an immutable paradigm for a spiritual transformation. It's immutable. It doesn't change, but that doesn't make it a formula. It's all about I think the purpose of story is to reveal some kind of transformation, some kind of shift in perception. And so when you approach it like that, you can start to see that story structure really is about a series of experiences that your protagonist goes through, as opposed to a conceptual model, which is a series of sort of plot points that you must hit. In other words, story structure really is about characters, not about plot. Plot is just the vehicle that carries the protagonist's transformation.
I had an argument about this a few weeks ago. I was interviewing a friend of mine who wrote a screenplay book based on poetics.
On the
And
poetics.
yeah, and that's all about plot. And I'm like, it's about character. No, it's about plot. And we just kind of we agreed to disagree on this whole thought process. So I'm happy to say that you said, I think one of the things that you said I've read online is that structure is a function of character, not plot. And
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more.
In fact, I'm going to show you this. I thought this was amazing. And this is Vicky King. She wrote
Mhm.
How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. This is in her book, and I love this. She says a lot of people think structure is scaffolding that your protagonist runs around.
Hmm.
She said, but it's not. Structure really is, it's inextricably linked. So structure and character are inextricably linked. There's no separating the two.
Mhm.
And so, in other words, take It's a Wonderful Life. Take the George Bailey, Jimmy Stewart character, and only Jimmy Stewart, only George Bailey in that movie could have that journey. If you give that desire, I want to leave Bedford Falls so that I can have a wonderful life, to any other character in cinema history, it's going to be the story's not going to work. And
Mhm.
so character and plot, or character, is nothing more than a function of the dramatic question. That's why I really have a problem with character sketches. When my writing students come up with character sketches, I characters don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in relationship to other characters. So
Mhm.
character sketches suggest that human beings are nothing but a series of character traits, and we're not. In Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, they did a study, and he said a lot of people want to believe that human beings behave characteristically because it makes us feel safe. Billy is a liar, Sally is honest.
Mhm.
Nora is always late, and Judy is always on time. Except that that's not true. Human beings behave situationally, not characteristically. So sometimes Billy is a liar and sometimes Sally's a liar. In other words, characters relate. I define drama as characters behaving uncharacteristically. That's what makes an interesting story. So, in spite of the fact that Jimmy Stewart wants to get the hell out of Bedford Falls, he's going to stay because he wants to sort of protect his father's legacy and take care of the town. And that's what creates the dilemma for the protagonist. Until you connect to your protagonist's dilemma, i.e., what is their central conflict, there won't be a story.
Mhm. Yeah, I spend a lot of time when I'm teaching my courses and mentoring screenwriters talking about, I call it the emotional wound. You call it the dilemma.
Yeah, yeah,
Each,
yeah,
each,
yeah.
each character has something emotionally that's kind of keeping them from being like the best version of themselves,
Right, or their flaw. Yeah,
their
yeah.
dilemma, whatever you want to call it. And then, while I'm telling them to design their story, I'm like, you take that emotional wound, plant it in the ground, and water it, and grow an antagonist out of it. So now, when they're facing the antagonist, they're actually facing their own emotional wound, and now they have to deal with that. Okay, and they have to do that in a
Interesting.
way. And so, you know, the whole design of it, all of a sudden it just becomes a natural conflict just on the basis of the design, because you're basically facing your biggest demon. What's Luke Skywalker's issue? Didn't grow up with his dad. Who's the antagonist? His dad. That's over 3 movies, but it's pretty clear once you start breaking it down and you start seeing these elements.